Song for a Whale, Chapter 29. Benny waited for me outside the buffet entrance. I told Grandma the night before that she was invited to come with me to watch for whales from the bridge, but when I mentioned the time, she flopped over in bed like just the thought of waking up so early was enough to knock her out. I'll wait for whales that wake up at a more reasonable hour. Benny led me through the dining area, and I shrugged as a way of asking, "Where are we going?" She pointed toward the back of the room and gave a thumbs up. I felt like I was getting used to the ship, but it was full of surprises. Benny led me past the lines of people, through one dining area to another, almost to the back of the deck, where there was another buffet line. It served the exact same stuff as the first one, but there wasn't as long of a wait. Many people stopped at the first food line they saw, like I had. We took our salmon, eggs Benedict, and banana waffles to an outdoor table with a view of the ocean around us. I set my notepad and pen between us, and Benny handed me a rolled up navy blue scarf from her coat pocket. I pointed to myself and mouthed, "For me?" She nodded and pointed to me too, then rubbed her arms and pretended to shiver. True, I had been cold, but I didn't know it was that obvious. Even with my coat zipped all the way up last night, the wind chilled my neck and upper chest. "Thanks," I signed. I tied the scarf around my neck, and Benny, stood up to show me how to tuck it under the collar of my coat. Big difference. She wrote on the notepad, "I thought you might want to borrow a scarf since it didn't seem like you had one." "You're out of school already?" Benny had told me the night before that her parents homeschooled her, then boat schooled her when her mom worked on cruise ships. I thought about making up something to tell her why I was there, but realized I didn't mind telling her the real story. Even though we just met, I felt like I'd known her for a long time. I shook my head. "School's still going on. I had to come now because I want to meet Blue 55. Benny's eyebrows rose and her mouth dropped open as she read the note. "You're going to meet him?" Sorry, I forgot." I waved her off as she reached for the pen, since I understood what she'd said. It felt good to share my plan with someone who was as excited about the whale as I was. "I hope so," I wrote. "He's supposed to be in Appleton around the time we get there." I hesitated before telling her about the song. She might think it was a dumb idea, but she knew more about whales than I did. Better to find out now if something was wrong with my plan. If she told me it wouldn't work out, I didn't know what I'd do. I made a song for him. The sanctuary workers will play it from the boat when they go out to tag him. I looked down at my plate as I slid the notepad to her, then glanced up to see her expression. She smiled while she scribbled on the page. "Can I hear it later?" "Sure." I took the last bite of my waffle and smiled back at her. Benny knew more about whales than I did, and she liked my plan. Maybe it really would work. After breakfast, Benny led me to the bridge of the ship, which, as it turned out, was not like a bridge at all. So I wasn't sure how it had gotten that name. It was a giant room that took up the middle of deck 8, floor to ceiling windows wrapped around the room, giving us a view in all directions. A long wooden counter topped with a dashboard of screens stretched across the bridge. So many dials, knobs, buttons, and joysticks filled the counter, I couldn't imagine how anyone ever learned what they were all for. A few overhead screens showed a radar, views of the ship, a map of our route, and rows of numbers that must have meant something to someone. A man dressed in black pants and a white shirt with gold stripes on the sleeves stood at the front of the bridge, looking out. I figured he was the captain. A couple of the other crew members sat in black leather chairs at the controls. For a few minutes, we stood at our places near the front windows while Sura made announcements into a microphone. Nothing but still waters stretched out ahead of us. Maybe it was the wrong day to look for whales. I turned when Sura pointed to our right. At first, I didn't see anything. Then, a plume of spray shot into the air. Benny glanced at me and motioned like she was writing with an invisible pen. Humpbacks, she wrote after I handed her my notepad. I looked out at the water again. Even though Sura had binoculars, I didn't know how she could tell what kinds of whales were out there from so far away. Closer to the ship, a whale shot up out of the water, then crashed down with a giant splash. It almost didn't seem real. The whale was about the size of a school bus, and there he was, flying out of the ocean. I turned to Benny to ask, did that really happen? The wonder on her face answered my question. She must have seen whales 1,000 times, but she still looked thrilled at the sight of them. Another whale breached, then left behind a wall of splashing water after it sank beneath the surface again. Seeing them in real life was nothing like looking at pictures or videos. I ran to the windows closest to the whale who had just leaped up from the water. Benny tapped my shoulder and pointed to the other side of the ship. I looked in time to see another whale crashing down onto the ocean's surface. I'd have to try to describe all this to Dad. I hoped I'd be able to get across how beautiful they were. These were the whales he listened to so much on that old record. The humpbacks, the symphony players. After a while, I got better at catching sight of the spray from the whales' blowholes, so I knew where they were. Sura estimated we were surrounded by about 50 whales. I wondered if Blue 55 ever swam with other whales, even though they didn't speak the same language. Andy had said he'd swim toward other whales, but then he'd go back to swimming alone again. Maybe he swam near those other whales, but not really with them. Kind of like how I was at school. When Benny let me know that her mom was wrapping up the whale watch announcements for the morning, I looked at the time and realized we'd been on the bridge for more than 2 hours already. Hadn't I just gotten there? Before we left, I wrote a note for Sura. How do you know there were humpbacks from so far away? She waved me over to a table and pulled out a chair for me. From her messenger bag, she removed a folder and flipped through some papers until she found the one she was looking for. The paper had a bunch of pictures of blow spouts from whales. The top of the page had the heading, There She Blows. Like in Moby Dick, I wrote, Captain Ahab said that when he saw a spout from the white whale, I remembered some of the book from a kid's edition that Grandma had given me. I tried to finish it a few times because I wanted to find out if the whale got away from the people who were hunting him, but I always fell asleep before I got to the end. Sura nodded and wrote, Each kind of whale has its own spout shape. If I spot them before the wind blows away the spray, I can identify what kind it is. She pointed to the picture of a humpback. The water that shot up from the whale's blowhole was shaped like an upside down teardrop. Some other whales blew out water in almost the same shape, but in a taller, thinner teardrop than the humpbacks. Gray and right whales blew double spouts of water in the shape of a heart. Sura turned to another page in her notebook, which showed pictures of whale flukes. Those were all different shapes, too. If she was close enough to see a whale's tail, she'd know what kind of whale it belonged to. On the back of the paper, I wrote, What about Blue 55? And slid it over to Sura. At the bottom of the page, she drew a quick sketch. Blue 55 had a fin on his back, like a fin whale, and the tail of a blue whale. Another way he was different from any other.